Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. So are T-Mobile and Verizon and other fixed wireless providers overstating their coverage on the FCC broadband map? Be right back and we'll look at that. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. So I saw this story in Telecompetitor and thought it was interesting. This was actually based on a story that was in Bloomberg. And it says here, T-Mobile and Verizon reportedly exaggerating FCC broadband map data. We dig into the details. It says here, service providers, including Verizon and T-Mobile, have exaggerated their fixed wireless coverage in rural areas, potentially preventing those areas from being eligible for funding in the $42.5 billion Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, according to a report from Bloomberg. It issue of reporting rules that enable providers to claim that an area has service when service isn't yet available there, but could be made available. And that is kind of a key point, is Bloomberg misunderstanding what is meant there as far as the rules for BEAD? Or are T-Mobile and Verizon overstating? I don't know. Telecompetitor tried to dig into it here, so we'll look at that. So fixed wireless broadband map data, the Bloomberg Post doesn't specify the source of the inaccurate data, merely referring to it as a government map, but that undoubtedly is a reference to the FCC broadband map, also known as the National Broadband Map, which is based on data collected by the FCC from broadband providers. And that data in the current map was collected at the end of last year, roughly, actually it wasn't at the end of last year, excuse me, it was like from June through September of last year. So that data is already old, especially when it comes to fixed wireless, because fixed wireless can be deployed pretty quickly as people like T-Mobile and Verizon are deploying that on towers. They don't need to lay fiber, those kinds of things. If they get a tower up and it's 5G capable, they can then count that area as having service as long as they can offer that service to people. And there are some questions coming up here in a minute that we'll see that are a little bit concerning that we need to talk about. So according to Bloomberg, T-Mobile claims its fixed wireless offering can serve 45 million addresses, more than a third of the 114 million locations listed on the government maps, the FCC map. Telecompetitor double check of the map data updated February 1st shows a somewhat lower 40 million addresses for T-Mobile that would be considered served according to the BEAD program rules. And again, this data was submitted between roughly June and September of last year. And that's what's being used as far as the data where broadband is available, because broadband providers during that period were supposed to upload their data as to what locations they covered. So there's supposed to be a location for every single household or business in the United States that can get broadband. And then the service providers were supposed to go up and say, yeah, we do cover this and provide the speed. Now, it's been noted that there have been some different problems with that. There were some locations that were missing, lots of locations in some cases, and those have been challenged. There were some providers that said they provided service in areas that they don't. We know that. There were some providers that said that did not put down that they provide service there. Some of them misunderstood what they were supposed to be doing and maybe only uploaded the areas where they actually have a customer versus where they can provide service. So they're supposed to provide homes passed and not necessarily, or not just customers that they serve. So there's a lot of errors in the map, and a lot of that has been corrected. And I'm sure there's still going to be some issues with the map, but hopefully the vast majority of errors, as far as the ones that would be impactful to having the funds be substantially different that states get, hopefully most of that's been fixed. Verizon claims it can cover 19 million locations, Bloomberg said. Here too, Telecompetitor found a somewhat lower number, between 17 million and 18 million locations that would be considered served by Verizon as of the February 1 map update. As the blog post notes, a provider is allowed to indicate that an area has broadband availability if the provider could potentially reach the area. Here too, the blog post is short on details. So it's not only short on details, it's really wrong in what they said. So this is what was in that blog post. Hang on one second. Here we go. Carriers are allowed to report places they could potentially reach, as well as those they already serve, according to Christopher Ali, a telecommunications professor at Pennsylvania State University. And that's true. They're reporting hypothetical service, not actual service, Ali said in an interview. The practice follows rules set down by the FCC, yet creates the false impression of rural of rural and connected America. But we know this is wrong. But he's absolutely wrong because that's the way they're supposed to do it. A provider, again, is not supposed to only put those areas where they have a customer. They're supposed to put any areas where they can serve a customer with a standard installation. So in other words, the customer picks up the phone, calls and says, hey, I'd like to get your service. I understand you have a gig service available in my area. And if the provider was accurate in their posting, let's say on the map, then they say, yeah, we do. We can be out there Tuesday next week. Does that work for you? That kind of thing. That's a standard installation. In other words, some kind of technology, fiber to the curb, HFC plant, or fixed wireless in that area where the customer can call and the provider can send out a wireless router, that kind of thing. That would be an area that's supposed to be on the map because unlike what he is saying here, they're not just reporting where they have customers because we don't want to know that. We want to know where somebody can get broadband service, not whether they have it already. We want to know that they can get it. And that is the accurate information that we're trying to get to in this map. And that's going to determine the amounts that each state gets because if there are areas on the map that don't have broadband service available, in other words, there's no broadband provider providing service at that address and no one can, that's what we want to know, right? In other words, there's not a standard installation. There's somebody that can't do a standard installation. They might have to come out and extend their fiber plant to get to that home, or maybe it's a long driveway and they'd have to drill under the driveway and they would charge the customer fees to get there and it would take a month and a half. That's not a standard installation. So he's wrong here, and because of that, the blog post to me seems suspect as well. But there's still some concerns that we can talk about here. So those details, the FCC rules allow providers to claim that they serve an area if they can bring service to that area within 10 days. And that's that standard installation as it's mentioned in the notice of funding opportunity. So it says standard installation, and it said something like, I think it says something like generally 10 days. It puts that amount of time out there that within, I'm assuming 10 business days, a service provider should be able to get out there under normal circumstances. Now, obviously, if there's something serious going on, natural disaster, a pandemic, other kinds of things, that could delay that. But if they have the ability generally to get out there in 10 days, that's a standard install. To put the availability numbers in perspective, T-Mobile had 2.6 million high-speed internet fixed wireless subscribers as of the year in 2022 and has been adding around 500,000 customers per quarter. So, and when it says customers, I think they're talking about subscribers here. So these are actually subscribers that they're adding. And again, they don't have every customer in the area where they cover. So that's pretty important, pretty significant there that they're able to do that. Verizon's latest earnings report for the fourth quarter of 2022 did not break out total fixed wireless subscribers, but according to a December 2022 fixed wireless report from T-Mobile that incorporated data from Lightman Research and OpenVault, Verizon gained 870,000 fixed wireless customers between the fourth quarter of 2021 and the third quarter of 2022. So Verizon, in addition to having fixed wireless, they also have other technologies out there. I think they've probably still got DSL out there, and they've got their Fios fiber kind of thing. But they've really been focusing on the fixed wireless because, again, they can get that out faster. So if they can get coverage, if they can put up towers and get fixed wireless coverage, then that could potentially lock out other providers from getting BEAD funding in that area. And then Verizon could continue to offer fixed wireless there or at their own leisure go ahead and put fiber out there. So that could be part of their strategy. And most of Verizon's fixed wireless access customers were gained beginning in 2022 when the company launched service using C-band spectrum. So that is licensed spectrum that they purchased when the government opened up C-band, and that is mid-band spectrum. So that's mid-band can do really good speeds, can get well over the definition for broadband that the FCC has. So well over, let's say 100 by 20 even. So somebody would be well over underserved getting C-band 5G spectrum. So that is broadband service. Same report includes a T-Mobile forecast to have 7 to 8 million fixed wireless access customers by 2025, and a Verizon forecast to have 4 to 5 million customers by 2025. It's worth noting that no service provider ever gets 100% take rates in the areas that they serve. So that's true. So again, this Bloomberg blog post, the same would go for any operator, whether, let's say, a provider that has gig fiber in an area, they are not reporting they're not just reporting the customers they have, they're reporting every single home that they pass. And that's the way that's meant to be. They don't have a 100% take rate on that. And subscribership generally bills over time, though, so the availability data could be accurate. So what it's saying there is the T-Mobile could be accurate in saying that we have these particular areas covered with our fixed wireless service. It's 5G service, mid-band spectrum, same with Verizon, where people can get access to this. So it could be accurate. Again, the blog post may be based on an erroneous assumption of what is meant there. T-Mobile's response was, let's see, Verizon declined to respond to a request from Bloomberg for comment. According to the Post, T-Mobile responded by noting that 50 million homes are eligible for the company's fixed wireless offering. So it's a higher number than Bloomberg originally had. Now, this is interesting. Availability is dynamic and dependent on network capacity, T-Mobile told Bloomberg, which raises an interesting point. It does. Wireless carriers such as T-Mobile and Verizon make a larger margin on mobile service than they do on fixed wireless. Accordingly, T-Mobile only offers fixed wireless where it has extra capacity on its mobile network. And in fact, AT&T has come out and said they haven't really said much about fixed wireless access. Again, they're a big fiber provider, but they're not focusing so much on fixed wireless. And part of that is because they don't really feel like they have the spectrum, and that it would be not reliable to say they have coverage in an area, because as soon as they get a certain number of customers, they're going to want to restrict that so they don't impact their mobile business. And T-Mobile is doing the same thing. Right now, for example, I checked in my area, and when I checked, it said I can get the service, but it still says, hurry, seats are limited, so to speak. In other words, they're going to only sign up so many customers here. And then eventually when the spectrum in the area gets kind of saturated, they want to make sure they don't harm their mobile business, so their cellular business as far as mobile phones, and they're going to start backing off of getting fixed wireless customers. So what does that mean for the future in these areas that they're saying they're covering now, right? Based on previous T-Mobile comments, the 50 million home fixed wireless eligibility figure only includes those areas where T-Mobile has sufficient capacity to offer fixed wireless. So that's good to know that they're not counting everywhere. There may be some areas where they don't feel like they have enough spectrum, even if they could offer the fixed wireless, they're not counting that. But this does raise the question of what happens to an area's eligibility if traffic on the T-Mobile network in that area grows to the point where it exceeds the company's threshold for offering fixed wireless. So in other words, if they say in a particular area that's considered unserved today or even underserved today, that they're covering that, what happens if they then get so many customers that they can't offer it any longer? A T-Mobile exec said last month that the company is considering whether there might be circumstances when a network investment aimed specifically at increasing fixed wireless capacity would be merited. He added, though, that no conclusion had been reached. So that really is what they would have to do. If they say that they're offering service there now, the problem is, again, if they say they're offering service in an area now, and then come May or so, the new broadband maps come out and T-Mobile's covering a whole bunch of territory, then that means that area is going to be considered served, and it's not going to count towards any funding, or it's not going to count towards the funding that the states will get. So the states will get less money because those areas will be covered. They'll be considered served, so their allocation of funding will be less. Now, in the future, it's going to take a while before states are able to actually send that money out, and they have some leeway there on where they send the money. But again, this is an issue where that somebody like a T-Mobile could then suddenly get, enough customers where they don't have enough spectrum, and then what do? Well, what would another operator do? Let's say a cable operator or a fiber operator, where they're going to increase capacity. They're going to, they have fiber running to everybody's home, or they've got HFC plant and coax running to everybody's home, so they don't need to worry about that. They got the connection. They just need to increase capacity in their plant, and that's something that they can do. But spectrum sometimes is a limited resource. So what does a mobile operator do? They don't have any last mile. They've got the air that they're using to get to the last mile. They don't have to worry about any cables. But what do they do if they run out of spectrum? They have to somehow get more. So that is a little bit tricky there. So see caveats here. It's important to note that stakeholders had the opportunity to challenge the FCC broadband map data. But if they're challenging T-Mobile's coverage, and T-Mobile today can actually deliver that service, then what's the challenge based on? They don't have much to stand on there. It's also worth noting, though, that sources have told Telecompetitor that the FCC only approves a small portion of challenges made and offered little or no detail to explain why certain challenges were rejected. I suspect a lot of challenges were rejected because they were already handled. Again, a huge number of challenges were made over locations that weren't there and some other things that were not right in the first go-round. So I'm thinking there were a lot of challenges that were duplicated later. There were fabric challenges that were made, and then the map came out. And maybe there were additional challenges that were made prior, even after the map came out, and then other people were making challenges that had already been made. I think a lot of it is based on that. Another important point to note is that the BEAD allocations will not be based on the current version of the National Broadband Map, but instead will be based on an updated version. So again, all of these challenges that are taking place, that have taken place, maybe some that are duplicate, those are all going to be reflected in the next map. They're not reflected in the current map. It's not like the map that you pull up today is being updated on a daily basis. The only thing you can see there is any like individual challenges that were made and maybe what the status is. But again, a lot of those individual challenges, if a customer sees that their home is not on the map, they might challenge that as far as being a broadband serviceable location, but that's probably already been taken care of. Or they may see that a particular service provider says they're there and they're not. It's possible that that's already been taken care of in the process. So let's see. The FCC is currently in the process of gathering updated broadband availability data from service providers. That started in January. They're supposed to be finished, I believe it's March 1st, when all of that updated data is supposed to be in the system. And then hopefully we'll be much closer to an accurate map at that point, because that's the data that it's going to wind up on the next broadband map, probably due out about May. Maybe I'm saying May 15th, just as my guess. One last point. Individual states will be responsible for awarding BEAD funding to service providers to cover some of the costs of deploying service to an area. States won't be required to use the National Broadband Map data to make those decisions, but instead have the option of gathering their own broadband availability data, an option that some states have already pursued. And I first looked at that and was like, is that really true? And I think it may be. The amount of money that each state gets is based on the FCC broadband map. So that's going to be determining the percentage of unserved locations the state has compared to the entire country. And that's how those allocations are made. But I thought that the states had to look at the FCC broadband map as to what was unserved as well, but maybe that's not true. So if a state later looks at it and says, this particular neighborhood, the FCC broadband map says that it's served, but we know that it's not, maybe they have the ability to say, well, this, even though it says it's served, we can demonstrate that it's not, and they have the ability to actually allocate funds to that area. It still could mean that they didn't go into the equation for how much money they got, but it's very possible that they could have control over that. I have to look back at that NOFO and see if that's the case. The Bloomberg coverage comes just days after Ars Technica published correspondence from an Ohio provider to a potential customer stating that the provider did not yet have coverage in an area, but had claimed that they did, so that a competitor would not be able to obtain government funding to build in that area. And I did a stream about that a week or two ago. So that's where a provider actually, a consumer, it actually wasn't a consumer, it was a competitor, challenged that this provider did not have gig service at that area. It was a cable operator. And the provider came back on the channel and said, yeah, that's true. We don't have that in your area, but we wanted to make sure we put a lot of investment in putting XGS-PON in this area in the future. And we didn't want somebody to be able to come in with federal funding and overbuild us. Well, that is not allowed. And I'm assuming that provider will be fined by the FCC. I think they're looking into that now. That's been submitted to their enforcement group or whatever. And that is the issue, is that somebody might claim they have service today and they don't. Or even, really, there could be somebody that's deploying fiber right now. Maybe they just started digging last month, and they could be finished by the time that these funds are available. That won't count, because in this next broadband map that comes out in May, it's got to be data as of December of last year that somebody could get that service with a standard installation. So even if somebody is finishing up their build right now, or even if T-Mobile and Verizon are turning up new 5G spots, hotspots, not hotspots, I guess, but 5G wireless service, fixed wireless service in areas, even if they're turning them up now and they're able to turn up another 100 or 200,000 customers in the future, that does not count on the next map. It's supposed to be only service that was available, that you could get it with a standard installation as of the end of last year. So that was kind of the fixed point for that. So all of any deployment and funds that are being used right now, or any private investments that's being used right now, that doesn't count for this next go round. If it was already available, then it does count. So that's how that works. So we don't know. The blog post seems a little suspect to me from the misunderstanding from the quote that we saw from that one person. I don't think they really understood that it's not about who has service, it's about who can get service. That's really the important thing. So I don't know. I guess we'll find out in the end here whether T-Mobile really is significantly overstating, or whether they're just stating where people can get the service now with a standard install. And then again, the kind of question is what happens if they get too many customers there and then suddenly people can't sign up? Does that lock out funding in the future? So we'll have to see how that all plays out here in the next few months. Thanks for joining me. If this was helpful or interesting, if you give me a like on the video. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button, click the bell to be notified when I'm live. And I will see you next time for Broadband Deployment News. Take care. Bye-bye.